We need US guarantees. Iran says that is the only way the Strait of Hormuz can be reopened safely. Basically, Tehran wants pretty much everything that was on the original and essentially abandoned Memorandum of Understanding. Remember that? The MOU put back on the table. This comes as Iran says it's talking with Oman and that they are both close to finalising a proposed deal to get shipping on the move again in the Strait. Iran's deputy foreign minister, quick to deny that talks are with the US on top of all of this. Lebanon appears to be back in the mix. More on that in a moment. I also want to alert you to a warning from some leading shipping groups. They say any Hormuz tolls demanded by Iran could drive up costs and threaten open navigation. Well, we've got a lot to cover. Elena Trines at the White House. Leila Karagozlu is here in London. And Leila, let's just start with this potential agreement between Iran and Oman at this stage. Even that, as we understand it, not a done deal, not as far as we know at this point, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the Iranians have said that they're very close to a proposed framework. So even when this gets announced, it's not going to be considered a full deal. They've made it really clear that it's going to be a bilateral agreement between themselves and Oman. And through that agreement, it's really going to solidify the sovereignty that Iran and Oman have over the Strait of Hormuz. They've also made it very clear through the deputy foreign minister that this isn't necessarily going to open the strait for all shipping. This is going to be a new pathway. It's going to be something to help alleviate it, but it's not going to really open the strait. For the strait to be opened, they've been very clear, there needs to be certain things that the U.S. does. And a lot of those things, as you said, really are what was in the MOU. They include ending the naval blockade on Iranian ports, addressing the sanctions that were imposed on Iran when that MOU was collapsing. They also are calling for a resumption of negotiations over Tehran's frozen assets, and then also addressing the U.S.'s, quote, failure, they say, to ensure stability in Lebanon. Now, the deputy foreign minister was asked about whether this was just Iran trying to implement Article 5 of the MOU, and he said it wasn't. He said that this really is a bilateral agreement, re-looking at a relationship that has been 60 years in the making with Oman. Now, as you know, throughout the entire week, President Trump has said, the Iranians are talking, we're going to have a deal, but the Iranians are holding steadfast by saying this is a bilateral agreement, it's just a framework, and it's going to be for a short period of time, just 1 to 3 months.
Good to get us up to speed on that. Thank you, Leila. Elena, this is then ostensibly between these two key regional parties. I mean, earlier on this week, we did have from a senior official who was very familiar with the matter, telling us here at CNN that talks were between the US, Iran and Oman at present. Not direct talks between Iran and the US, but there were these sort of tri-party talks. It's difficult to tell whether those were very specifically about the Strait of Hormuz or whether these talks were about something sort of wider at this point. What is the administration saying about all of this?
Yeah, look, I think there have been involved in some of these discussions, of course, in recent days, even if not directly. I will tell you from the conversations, Becky, I've been having with people here at the White House. They said that over the weekend, even people in Iran like Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, reaching out to people like Steve Witkoff, one of the key diplomats here in Washington, who has been very involved in these talks. So I think there has been a level of, the United States being a maybe not direct part of these talks, but clearly involved at some level. And we've heard the president say many times that a deal needs to be completed and quickly. He said by the end of the week, or he would resume striking Iran. Now, of course, how much stake do you put in those comments when the president has issued many threats like that just to pull back? But that is currently what the administration is trying to project publicly. On the other hand, you do have acknowledgement from people like the vice president, J.D. Vance, someone who has led the delegation for these talks with the Iranians and the past, acknowledging that these have been very messy and that he says the Iranians have been very hard to deal with. Particularly, of course, you saw they had an MOU, it fell apart. Now they've exchanged strikes. Now they're trying to get back to the negotiating table. This has been going on, Becky, far longer than I think many people in the White House and throughout Washington expected it to. But I do want you to listen to some of the comments that Vance made in a Fox News interview last night.
I do think that where we will ultimately land, it's going to be messy and it's going to take some time to get there. Where we will ultimately land, as you see, oil, I think, was at $79 today. Those oil prices are going to come down and stay down. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, and the United States will be in a stronger position. But we're kind of in the middle of the game, and I think people are trying to prejudge exactly how this is going to go.
Now, I will say, from the president's perspective, and this is what many officials here tell me repeatedly, is that his goal is still what it has been from the beginning, Becky. He wants diplomacy to prevail, but he's keeping strikes, including the one he issued over the past weekend, on the table should Iran really not make any sort of movement on the diplomatic front.
Well, with that in mind, Elena, before I let you go, tell me what President Trump is saying about reporting of severely depleted U.S. defense missile stockpiles.
Yeah, Becky, just after midnight, the president today lashed out at a number of different media outlets who have been reporting on the depleted stockpiles of munitions that the U.S. military has. He wrote on social media that the U.S. has massive amounts of munitions. He said, especially in certain types. He said large amounts are also being manufactured and shipped to the U.S., that they're working on deals to continue building up the stockpile. But this is something that has been a major problem for the Pentagon in recent months. This idea that they are burning through a lot of their missiles and munitions with the rate of strikes that have been issued throughout this war, and really throwing a lot of doubt and uncertainty on how this is going to impact the U.S. position in the war moving forward. I will note we had great reporting yesterday from our colleagues who had noted that the U.S. military has exhausted nearly 80% of its interceptors for a key missile defense system known as THAAD in recent months. They also reported that the U.S. military has burned through roughly half of its Patriot interceptors since the start of the war as well. I will note again, the president has been aware of this. I know in my conversations that different people in the military, throughout the intelligence community, have been telling the president about this. I think he's taking a big issue, though, with the idea that it's being publicized, that this is a problem, especially at a time when he wants Iran to believe that the U.S. has the power to continue hammering them. So this is something that's definitely going to continue playing a role, I think, in some of the negotiations behind the scenes, and also contributing to another thing that I've been told as well, which is that in the intelligence community, many leaders are very worried that Iran will ever honor commitments on any sort of deal that is made. So this really putting the U.S. position in a fragile place right now.
President Trump is insisting, despite numerous reports, that the U.S. has plenty of munitions and there is no shortage. He posted overnight that the military has, quote, massive amounts, adding that large amounts are being manufactured and shipped to the U.S. as needed. CNN and others have been reporting this whole week on dwindling stockpiles of key air defense systems during the war with Iran. Sources telling CNN the U.S. military has burned through roughly half of its Patriot interceptors since the start of the war and 80% of its THAAD missile inventory. Joining us now, former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker. It is good to have you with us. Thank you for being here. When you look at these numbers, the president is publicly denying that there is a major shortage of stockpiles, but the numbers are the numbers, and they're tracked not just by us, but by many different organizations, including CSIS, who has looked at this, and they are dangerously low. So what advice would you be giving the president at this moment when you know that so many of these munitions that are being used directly in this war with Iran are on a very short scale?
Well, the fundamental thing is to make sure that you have an alignment of your goals and your means. So it's okay to use air defense systems. The people are sending missiles at our allies or at our troops. Okay, you have to use them. But you have to make sure that what we are doing has a guaranteed end result, that we can achieve what we are trying to do. and that at that end point, we will not be in a military action anymore. The problem with the way we've gone about this war against Iran is that we've lacked that. We have a constant effort to put pressure on Iran, never a willingness to go all the way for regime change, which would be one thing, or a willingness to accept that, okay, there's a status quo that we're going to live with. So we've been in this in between, and that just creates an unending burn rate for the things that we're doing. So I think it's really important to decide, are we going to let the regime be and then cut a deal with them, which may involve them having more control over the Persian Gulf, which is a terrible thing, or are we going to get rid of the regime and then organize that and do what that takes? But right now we're in this constant cycle, and that cycle is going to be intolerable for us.
Look, it's been described as a quagmire right now, and you're laying out the two things that the president is trying to figure out how to balance which way the United States will go. I do want to ask you about the fact that Iran is dealing with Oman, it says, and not talking to the U.S., but is trying to work out a deal that may be imminent to open the Strait of Hormuz. If the U.S. is indeed sort of being cut out of these talks, what leverage still exists here, and does that concern you?
Well, we have a great deal of leverage in the sense that we can shut down the trade. We can blockade the Persian Gulf. We can prevent ships going in and out. Iran is going to have a very difficult time selling anything, therefore difficult time getting money for the regime. So we have some leverage. But the problem is that is not leverage that's going to change the regime, its behavior, its attitudes, its actions. That regime is going to stay in place if we do that. I should point out that the memorandum of understanding that was signed some time ago and was supposed to result in a ceasefire, that envisioned direct talks between Iran and Oman. So Iran is actually doing what we said they should do, which is work something out with Oman. The problem is that, as you say, we're not a party to that. It'll be temporary. It's going to involve Iran exercising a